on this, oops. There, I gotta see my screen again. All right. Thanks. We're going to be talking about implementing and promoting a succession plan and that shared leadership piece in your clubs, in your volunteer structures and programs that you work with. And so we're going to share with you a variety of tools that can help you work with your fellow volunteers and just creating and thriving environments that are just really a positive place for youth development to happen. And then we'll also share all of those tools along the way. My name is Carrie Olson, and I am a regional extension educator working, of course, for the University of Minnesota Extension. And I work with volunteer systems, started like 14 years in a county office and then moved to a regional level position. And I've been focusing a lot of my time in more recent years around volunteers and really very passionate about the program. And I'm joined today with Patrick. Patrick, can you introduce yourself?
All right, thanks, Carrie. Hello, everyone. I'm Patrick Jurek. I'm an extension educator based out of the Rochester Regional Office. I've also worked in a number of different counties before going to the regional system. I'm also a 4-H parent, and my wife and I are involved in a 4-H club that has been in existence for a number of years, and happy to be here. And thanks for sharing your lunch break with us.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Like I said, I'm gonna do just a couple simple poll questions to get us started here. And it's actually just gonna be, there, oh, hold on, let me go back to the poll questions here. Well, it looks like Jill didn't preload anyone's for Thursday today, so we actually won't have any poll questions this morning. Sorry about that, but we'll just let them jump right in with their presentation.
Well, that sounds great. Thanks, guys. I think we'd heard that maybe there were some questions about the polls earlier today too, so that makes sense. Hey, well, this is Nebraska. This is exciting to talk with you guys. I work out of the Morris Regional Office, but also telecommute and work from my home office, which I'm doing today. And that is just straight north of you guys. If you jump at I-29 and go about 5 hours from Omaha, I live at the bottom of the bottom of the bump or the spur on that western Minnesota border. So just really cool. And we'd love to know where you guys are joining us from. And so we're going to use that annotate button. And if you can find move your cursor around and find that toolbar that pops up and disappears and pops up every now and then, and find your annotate button. It's this little pencil. It should give you a variety of options. You could do a stamp or text, whatever you want to do. And just go ahead and mark a spot somehow. Hey. Someone's pretty good at doing stars there. Oh, a couple of you from the same county. Okay. Looks like most of you are figuring out where the tool is. Thanks for trying it. Patrick and I are both experiencing moisture accumulation. Mine more just on the verge of not being snow is coming down now, Patrick. And you mentioned you've had snow all day. Is that right? Or rain all day?
Well, yeah, rain pretty much all day, but we're down in southeast Minnesota, is right on the border of the Mississippi River, and the Mississippi River is flooding. So yeah, spring rain and snow runoff.
Yeah, we'd be happy to send you some rain. I hear some of your counties could use some of that moisture. So, right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead.
Sounds good.
So, why are we doing this? Well, Patrick and I have been working with supporting our clubs and our staff for a few years, and we were hearing a couple years back that staff are really feeling like they're always getting pulled in to help these struggling clubs that were on the verge of dissolving. And upon further examination, it really became apparent that a lot of clubs didn't have a system in place to train and fill retiring leader positions. There's just, and sometimes there was a disproportionate amount of people that were actually carrying on all the jobs of the clubs. And we know that that's true in many places. And while it's true in Minnesota, we suspect it might also be true in Nebraska. And so we've tried to attempt to share some different ideas and options out with our volunteers to help them in that conversation, to share the leadership and to, really think about intentional succession planning as well. And so we will share some of those tools with you today. Our goals will be to help you understand that the value of a culture of team leadership and how that can make it a lot less stressful overall for that club in the future. We want to provide you some examples of shared leadership and succession planning, because sometimes it's just getting the idea in your head. And when you're stuck in a rut, you just can't think of any other way. And so hopefully you will have some other ideas to share with us, because we know that you guys are all very knowledgeable and have been, a variety of years of experience in the 4-H program, but you have your experiences, and we'd love to learn from your experiences as well. And then hopefully we'll be able to leave with some ideas that you can use to share leadership with your club and communities. We're going to do what we call a waterfall super chat a couple different times today. And so in it, you'll get the question will be shared out front. So of course, our question for this slide is, how do you share the leadership in your club or communities that you work with right now, or committees? So this is your current status, currently, how do you share that? We'll ask you to go ahead and type that in the chat box, but don't press send. So everybody can go ahead and type the response. And then when I give you some statement today, maybe it's go Clovers, then we'll press the send and we'll have everything kind of flow through at the same time. So yeah, go ahead. Hopefully hopefully everybody doesn't say we don't share the leadership. I do it all. I'm hoping that's not the response we get, but okay, go Clovers. Share with us whatever your responses might be. All right, we got a few starting here.
There's 2 club leaders and other project leaders. I'm trying to give people responsibilities so they aren't scared of, since we are robotics and rocketry.
Yeah, Christina, very important. Yeah, taking those baby steps so what people can ease into the idea of volunteering and experience success. Yeah.
We have families volunteer to share a game or activity before our meetings. And some of them are just starting, but they're hoping to have 2 leaders to kind of share that out.
Great, thank you. Great, appreciate that. And if you have another idea that you didn't get out there yet, you're welcome to type it in. Yep, and unfortunately, some of us will sometimes have times and we're that one leader and we're trying to figure out how to pull everybody together. And so we'll plan and hope to leave you some more ideas today before we're done.
All right. So as we think about our club leadership or that shared leadership, the old saying that it takes a village, and it takes a village to have a vibrant youth group. So a village where we need to effectively utilize talent and skills of many people, and as well as young people. This picture was taken on the main street of a small rural community in southwest Minnesota, and it's a really good example of how, even though small communities have a limited population, there's opportunities to utilize the skills and the talents of people in your community. So when you think about this, obviously you can see the firefighters in there, the elderly senior citizens who can provide a great background on history or stories of the past that young people can learn from. And so when we think about shared leadership and pardon me, and taking advantage of that opportunity to tap into the wisdom and the resources in our community, we're going to talk about how do you share the workload? How do you tap into the resources that are out there, so it's not just waiting down on one person who's in that key leader or that organizational leader responsibility. So I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah. So one of the tools we use in Extension is just a way to kind of frame our work around volunteers. And so we'll share that with you today, just kind of overviewing, just really simple. And like I said, it's a way to frame our work. It's been around for a while. Dr. Nolan out of North Carolina started it back in 96, actually, or 69. So yeah, that's like 1 year younger than me. Okay. Yep. Aged myself. And then it was adopted by the USDA and brought forward to 4-H staff. But it's really starts with the I, and the I is stands for identification. And this is a process of identifying the positions and finding the people who have the skills and attitudes needed to fill specific roles. This includes identifying places where volunteers could provide support, as well as recruiting the right people for the role. Okay, so obviously, we're going to have a system with volunteers. We got to figure out how to identify them. Oops. Next one is S, that stands for selection and screening. This is the process of choosing the right person or people for the role based on their interests, skills, and available time. You know, not everyone's a good fit for all roles, and so it's important to choose thoughtfully. Orientation. You may remember the volunteer orientation you received when you started your role. This is the much smaller version. This is where you help those you've recruited to understand the expectations of the role they're assuming, how it relates to other clubs, other entities in your county, and the bigger program as a whole. Then the training. This is where we're spending time on what we're asking that volunteer to do for us. So it's really more of a skill-based piece. It's the specifics. You're placing people into roles. You want to make sure they're prepared to do that job. The U in Isature stands for utilization, and that's really where the rubber hits the road and your helpers get going with their work. So as they're doing their work, you want to think about how can you successfully support them, remove barriers that get in their way and just help them be successful. Recognition, we appreciate that everyone needs to be appreciated for the work that they contribute. And some people like them in different ways, and they can be formal ways, they can be informally, but making sure that we do recognize people. And then the last area of the Isature model is that evaluation. And within evaluation roles, it can be formal or it can be informal, but just really taking the time for people to reflect on the work, whether it was a specific short-term project or if it was more of a long-term year project activity or volunteer role, and allowing them to think about things that went well and offering feedback and how they'd like to do things differently in the future, and if they'd like to continue with that role or not. And so the thing we need to remember with Isature is it is a continual process, and it will just keep going and going as long as you're intentional about it. Simply asking for help, or worse, assuming people will jump in and help, will not bring any of us success. You have to know where and how help is needed. You have to find the right person for the job, and get them the information they need before they get started so that they can be successful. A great leader of volunteers is sort of like that conductor of an orchestra. You guys are out there making sure all the parts fit together. They're harmonious in motion in order to make beautiful music for all of us. So it's a cycle. You might have some projects that are in different areas of the cycle at any one time. You might be in recognition with a clump fundraiser. You might be in identification with a new holiday event coming up. And so what are some tools that can help you along the way with that? Well, the first one that we utilize, and you'll notice here in the bottom right-hand corner, we also have a little Google folder for you that you can have access to all the resources we mentioned today, as well as the slide deck. You can go there with the QR code, or you can use that link, and it'll be throughout our presentation today. Whenever there's a resource that'll have a handout, it'll have that code there. So, oh, there's a handout about this. Great. And on this one, it's really trying to help you think of what is some task or activity that needs to be done, and how do we divide that work up? And so a simple way, might be to, in your committee, have everyone or have at least one person draw a hand and think about and brainstorm what are all the tasks that need to be done for whatever you're trying to recruit, whatever the piece that you need some additional volunteers around. And then once you spend 3 to 5 minutes yourself identifying what those tasks are, then visiting either with your neighbor or with your whole committee, if it's a committee group that's together, and think about those tasks, see how they compare to others around that same task. Did you miss one? Did somebody else come up with something? And then, writing down what are all of these tasks and asks. And then if we take that into the Isature model, we start to apply the different elements of the model. Identify, we try to look at volunteer roles that teens and adults could play together. It might mean grouping some tasks together, that are very similar. It might be, oh, nope, these are all big enough tasks on their own that we need a different volunteer for each of them. After we've made that decision and come to some agreement, if we're working with a group on what those might be, then we start to think about that select, what are some individuals who would be appropriate for carrying out those roles or tasks? Maybe it's based on their interests, their available time, skills, and who might give the ask to them. And then the next thing to do after we've given the yes and you've gotten some yeses, then remember we need to take time for the orientation, the training, as well as supporting them while they're doing the work. And then finally, when the work is done, that time for recognition, that time for evaluating. And our handout will have you some good prompter questions in each of these sections for you to utilize. All right, so here's another question for you. So what are the barriers that get in the way with sharing leadership in your group? Go ahead and type in the chat box. Don't press send yet. Give you a minute. Because if there weren't any barriers, it'd be super easy, right? Yeah, of course there are some barriers out there. Okay, go Clover, press send. Let's see what you got.
Oh, they're starting to come in.
Here we go.
So lack of active parents is one I see in here. That's kind of a couple times. Some different ideas. Giving up control. I think sometimes that's hard for a lot of us, right?
Yeah, that control piece. Yeah, and sometimes it's like, okay, if I break it up into a little more pieces, and I think control isn't bad. I think because some of us are like, that's how we show out that responsibility strength. We want to make sure it all happens, and so it's easier if you're doing it, but it might be less stressful if you weren't doing it all. And we will share an inventory later today about trying to help capture some of that information and make that not seem so overwhelming when you're giving up control.
We're adding new things. And so I need to understand what I'm doing before I can communicate what I need. So
Yeah.
timing isn't always on their side.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, thank you guys for kind of starting to think about those barriers and that. What I'm sure you do know is that relationships are key. It's just the key component in creating a welcoming environment and encouraging relationships between the youth and adult volunteers in your group will help your group be more successful. We've learned through years of practice that simply requesting support from that tried and true volunteer base is not always the most effective means of getting volunteers to enthusiastically jump up. And it can also lead to burnout. So it's really important to consider those new families and new community members that could also give support. Maybe they're unaware of what roles you're looking for, what tasks they could maybe do. Maybe it's those baby steps of volunteer opportunities. I think, did I hear like somebody said they were doing like a family would do something before the club meeting, lead a game or host it kind of. I think that hosting idea with clubs is a wonderful way to encourage all families to be involved. And it's, if they beginning of the year, of course, someone who's been more involved in the club could be the host. So they're role modeling some ideas of how to do it. But that's kind of even if it's not hosting like a physical location, it's coming up with the game or bringing us refreshment for the end for our social piece. It's just a great way to incorporate more people and allow them to take a baby step into doing something with your group. And overall, you really want to try to create that culture of positive and welcoming. So people really feel inspired to do their part. They feel appreciated and they're like really building that sense of culture and community. So some tools that you could utilize. Got a simple tool, more informal and a more formal tool here for you. The first one is just really helping you make that ask. You've still got to identify what is the ask, right? And so the paper plate potluck activity, you take all the tasks and roles, maybe you brainstorm them using the fist or hand of 5 earlier, and write one task on each plate and a short description of what that task is. Okay. Then the leader has everyone gather around the table and one at a time reads the task and description on each plate before they place it on the table. After all the plates are read, individuals are asked to pick up a plate that they might feel like they could volunteer to do. And then if there's a plate left on the table, the group really talks about, is this something we really need? Is it a task that's valued by the club? Is it a requirement of the club to do it? And if so, then if somebody's willing to switch tasks or do more than one task. And my club has used this a couple times, and it's actually worked when we had a lot of newer, younger families breaking up the task, because it was a really great opportunity for the leader at that time, who was myself, to share what all the activities were too. It can give that little bit of description behind it. The other one I'm sure you've probably seen before is this sharing your time and talent survey. It's just some way to gather the information from volunteers. And so this one tries to look at some base skills, not based on projects, but, so do I like to do this or I like to do that? And try to be very broad in the volunteer interests so that the leader can take a look and try to match them to other things. And then on the backside, there's some open-ended questions and time availability questions as well. All right. Next super chat, I'm going to turn over to Patrick.
All right, as we shift gears here a little bit, we've got our next chat. We'd like you can see that in the screen here. What are the advantages of having a team give leadership to a 4-H group or club? So if you want to start typing that, and then I'll give you the countdown and we'll hit the send button. All right, we'll go with Clover Send. Different perspective, experiences, and knowledge, and also a division of labor. Very good. Yeah, Sarah, you got that, hit the nail on the head. New and different ideas. Absolutely. All right. Well, more positive influence for younger members to see they can also lead. Yeah, very good, Jackie. Ditto, Sarah. Yeah, very good. So I have to share with you an extension experience that has happened several times to Carrie and I, that usually in the fall of the year, we'd get a phone call to say that a club leader is stepping down and there's no one stepping forward to take on that new role or that leadership role. And the club was on the verge of closing down or ending. And so we started looking and doing some research on, which clubs had a continuation of shared leadership or that rotation of shared leadership. And so we discovered what worked with clubs. We're going to share that in just a couple of minutes, but we're going to talk right now about that club structure and going from that role of that sole leader to sharing that leadership. So historically, many 4-H clubs have just had one organizational leader, and that is someone who would shepherd all the work of the club. The role of the organizational leader encompassed a lot of things: liaison with the extension office, working with youth leaders, coordinating the program for the group, chartering paperwork, and a number of other things. And so today we're going to have you share or consider an approach that involves multiple people in an organizational leadership role. So what are the advantages of this? Well, one, it's shared organizational leadership, so it's less time and energy or demands for one person. The group is less dependent on one individual, which is very helpful when other life demands, good and bad, need attention, and at the same time as the 4-H club activities. People can assume tasks that are more closely aligned or fit with their interest or their talents. 4-H club leaders, club leadership is more stable as people change their level of involvement. So some people move away, employment changes, or the youngest child graduates out of the program. And then there's a multiple of youth and adult volunteers assuming responsibilities, and that provides many opportunities for getting other people in the club, more ownership of the club by taking on those different roles. And then finally, 4-H members have multiple people that they can call or connect with to answer questions. And then when we have this structure and more people and more youth and adults are giving leadership opportunities, we're really building that bench strength of the group, and it expands the capacity to have more people involved in the program. So what we're going to do now is talk about some different types of structures, and to think about, what's one that can fit your club, or are there a couple different structures that can fit your club. So the idea is that you rotate. There's that succession planning. So the first one is called the 2-year rotation. And this model represents a 2-year commitment and involvement of 2 people in a staggered rotation on the leadership team. So the first year, the new person on the leadership team serves as an assistant leader. The second year, this individual serves as the organizational leader. And then the third year, the person rotates off of the leadership team. There's a structure called 3-year rotation option A. And this model represents a 3-year commitment that involves 3 people in a staggered rotation on the leadership team. The first year, the new person on the leadership team serves as an assistant club leader. The second year, this individual serves as the organizational leader or that key contact with the extension office. And the third year, the individual serves as an advisor, kind of that providing knowledge or information. After the third year, the individual in that advisor role rotates off of the leadership team. And then 3-year rotation option B. This model represents a 3-year commitment and involves 3 people in a staggered rotation on the leadership team. So the first year, the new person on the leadership team provides leadership for club activities. The second year, the individual provides leadership for club programs, so project areas, whatever it may be. And the third year, the individual serves as that organizational leader, that contact with the extension office. After the third year, the individual in that organizational leader role rotates off of the leadership team. And it's important that they do rotate off. I know we've had situations where a club would say, well, if I rotate off, can I come back in as that first year leader? And what we're really trying to do is share that workload and make sure that others are getting involved as they're coming into the club. There's a 2-year leader rotation. 2-year leaders, or 2 leaders, serve for 4 years. And this model represents a 4-year commitment and and involves 2 people in a staggered rotation on the leadership team. So the first 2 years, the new person on the team serves as the assistant leader. The third year, the individual serves in the organizational leader role for a 2-year commitment. After the completion of the 4th year, this individual rotates off of the leadership team. So you're looking at, if you're recruiting people to be in this role, you're recruiting somebody for 4 years. Another option is the model where 2 people are paired to serve in any of the positions or the roles mentioned. So we've heard about clubs dividing up the yearly leadership by a set of time when the volunteers are available, either monthly or seasonal, and then they divide up the work from that standpoint. So based more on their availability. Okay, so what are some things to think about as we're talking about that rotation of leadership? So certainly there are limits of rotating out the leadership and the loss of history or experience, but the benefits are also many. So it keeps the leaderships fresh, it brings in new ideas, it's appealing to volunteers who don't want to serve at that level for many years, or 15 to 20 years. In 4-H, we want to develop both youth and adults. And this is a great place for volunteers who have served in a leadership role to mentor the next generation of 4-H club leaders. And we want to make sure that we keep our 4-H club strong and moving into the future. We also need to remember that the vibrant group characteristics change how to do things, but not what they do. So when we're open to people doing things a little bit differently, but still have the same goal of positive youth development, that club really stays vibrant. So with the club leadership transfer, a succession plan ensures that seamless transfer. I love this picture of the baton. We're in track and field season, and if you ever watch the relay races, some clubs or some teams hand off the baton effortlessly. Sometimes it gets dropped, sometimes it gets a little fumbled, but what we're striving for is that seamless transfer of that leadership in the club. and then to make sure that it's a quality learning environment for young people. So succession planning takes time. It requires open communication. It requires mutual respect and trust. Rotational leadership isn't just for 4-H clubs. It can also be helpful for federations, leaders councils, project committees, and other opportunities. Now, I have to share with you, working with a number of different clubs, nobody's really jumping up and down to say, please pick me to be the next club leader. And oftentimes, when a club is struggling with their leadership, it will actually require a time to sit down, either with extension staff or another volunteer, to kind of negotiate, to say, okay, we've got X number of kids in our club. How many families are involved? What's the rotation? Do we look at a 3-year or 2-year rotation? But actually just having that conversation about, can one person serve one more year in that advisor role, and then can you recruit people to serve as that assistant club leader and that club leader? Once it gets put in place, it is highly effective. So something to keep in mind. And so a couple other considerations when you're looking at succession planning with your club: what's the club size? What's the number of volunteers versus number of parents? And that was a comment that came up earlier, which was very good. If you have a lot of parents, but a few people that are in that volunteer role, one of the goals that we have is to move people into that volunteer role. And that can start certainly getting signed up as a volunteer with their extension office, but then also assisting, using that paper plate activity that Carrie talked about. And then thinking about what are the skills and interests of the volunteers. Is what's the level of club involvement? Are they doing a lot of things, or are they sort of inactive? And people vote with their feet, especially where there's opportunities to learn and grow. What's the grade level of your membership? Do you have a lot of young kids that are in there, or is your club mostly made up of people that are going to be graduating out of the program in a couple of years? If that's your case, thinking about rotation or recruitment of new families to make sure that that club is able to continue on. And then think about the leadership of the clubs, of your club. Who are the groups that you work with? Think about who are potential individuals that can share their wisdom or their knowledge, and also who else who's been involved in the past, but maybe rotating out of that role. One other consideration is that once a person rotates out of that club leadership role, it's not that they're done being a leader, but it opens up other doors of opportunities. I had one club leader who rotated out, and she recognized that the ambassadors or the teen leaders in their club really needed some attention. And so she took on that area and really had a good time with it. So thinking about that consideration of size and number of volunteers and parents. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie.
Hey, thanks, Patrick. Another thing that really can ease moving forward, especially if there's been a leader in place for a while, is what we're calling this club capital portfolio. It can be used as an interview. There's a tool that goes with this in the folder, or it can be, there's a section for the new volunteer, there's a section for the current or outgoing volunteer. It can also be a self-completed handout that allows those volunteers just to try to capture all that additional resources and wisdom that they may have, and that sometimes they don't think about passing on to the successor. So it's trying to identify what is the social and human capital. This section asks, who are those great contributors, those supporters in and outside of the club who are really willing to support in any way. You might provide the individuals' names, businesses, organizations, who you contact or who you've been contacting in the past, and what kind of support they provided. Maybe there's Jim, the manager at the local hardware store, he's more than willing to donate supplies for project learning, and that others didn't realize maybe was happening, or the connections to individuals that are alumni that are in different organizations or businesses in your community. The next piece is the natural or cultural or built capital, those are those great spaces and places that this club has been going to for field trips and other offsite learning. Maybe it includes some seasonal experiences to gardening centers and the contact information there. Or maybe there's recreational facilities or local parks that they go for outdoor education. Or maybe there's even the group residential living facility that you commonly work with and have some key contacts for providing some of that community service pieces. And then the financial capital, I think in 4-H, we've been doing a better job of that. In most recent years kind of required with our chartering and that, but still, where are those and what are those financial resources? And then the last piece is that inventory capital. And that's really talking about, what are those pieces of valuables that we might own within the club and where do they live? Who's responsible for them? And this is an opportunity to just list them. And sometimes when we don't use something every year or every time we gather, people forget about things. And so it's a place to capture that. And when we started sharing this, Patrick and I, with a couple of different leadership groups, we did have a few older or more experienced, pardon me, I should say more experienced club volunteers that said, oh, this is really helping me with that weight that they felt about leaving the club as a club leader. They felt really just terrible about saying, I've done this for 14 years. I need to step down. And there was just that sense of guilt in asking that of the other club volunteers. But by providing a way for them to try to capture some of this information, this wealth of knowledge that they're carrying around with them, was helping them ease the transition. And so hopefully maybe it can help you with that as well. And also with any, portfolio, we know the more diversified, the more transferable capital is from one leadership team to the next year, the more healthy and vibrant that club will be in its succession planning. Okay, so right now, with the size of our group, I think we will just kind of talk together. We'd love to hear. So what is the structure currently going on with your club? We could have a few minutes just to do an open mic on hearing what's working currently for you or what's not working. What are your struggles? Anybody willing to share or type in the chat box?
I'm willing to share right now currently, and I think I was on the other day, and so you might remember me, but we have an aging group, had some poor leadership and lost well over half of our group, probably 12 to 15 defects to other organizations. So as they're aging, I'm having a hard time as I'm trying to keep things together of trying to get volunteers, because I think they're seeing the same thing. Like, okay, our youngest is 11 in our group, and a lot of them are in probably the 14 to 16, 17 age, and they're all kind of, I think they're at the point of like, they put their time in, and they're not wanting to go. And out of that, again, there's really about 5 active families. There's 3 or 4 that are just pretty much inactive. So it's been a struggle to try to piece them along and trying to get some help for myself. But then also the same thing, as I've said, we're 2 or 3 ways a year from losing the whole program, because we'll have too many probably aging out. So we've got to try to recruit and do other things, and just have lost some of the parents maybe on that, but at the same time trying to see if I can figure out a way to energize them, but then also trying to energize bringing younger groups of kids in. We've had a few defects this year of younger kids because they were Clover kids, and there was a 5 or 6 year gap there. Really nobody to hang with. I get it. They went to a lot younger club. Totally get it, but we've got to get that, or we're in the same. We're just digging a deeper hole each year. So love to hear kind of some ideas that you may have.
So are you currently seeing that you're in a solo leadership, or do you have some sort of support, assistant?
I'm in a solo leadership. I mean, there is an assistant that's kind of helping a little bit, but quite honestly, that's the person that was causing the pain, the leader that was a past leader. So I've kind of pushed him a little bit to the side. The people that stayed understand and probably know him personally. So it wasn't anything intended or anything. It was just a bad situation. But anyway, long story short, I'm kind of solo, but pretty much I'm solo at this point. Yes.
That's where I can see it would be really valuable, even, I don't know if you know everybody's interests and abilities already, so the survey pieces, isn't something you need to do, or if that's an opportunity, or even the plate idea of, well, here's what we've currently been doing in this club, what do we want to do in the future? And then who's going to help do it? Because you can say, currently our club, I can't do it all myself. And, how do you break up and share that role? Yeah.
I like that idea, Carrie, and I wrote it down because I think that'll be kind of our end of the year meeting,
There you go.
and throwing that out there and going, here, hey, this is the situation. I need more help. We need a succession plan. Who can do these things? Here's the 6 or 8, things. Here's, somebody do the club project, and somebody do a club, tour, and then whatever else we've got set up to do, and project talks and things. And I like that. So I did write that down, and I think that's something I'll take back and we'll utilize for our kind of our end of year deal.
Of course, it'll take people around the table to have that conversation, but I have heard back, and I've seen it happen in my own club. Some really powerful conversations about, so what do we need to do in the future? What are we committed to? Somebody steps forward, and maybe there's some things that, maybe that happened before in this group, but doesn't have to happen again. And so any other of us in the group have a wise thought or a suggestion that could help with this?
Well, one I'll share, and really some good points. One is to think about that club meeting like a pizza. And how do you slice up that meeting or that meeting experience? So, one slice can be a pre-meeting activity. Somebody talked earlier about sharing that with families do that. What's your business meeting? You're doing hopefully demonstrations or some sort of public presentation. And then what's the educational and the fun pieces? And those pizza slices are going to change throughout that course of that 4-H year. But if you can recruit or bring in people to assist, a guest speaker or a presenter, could be the sheriff's department or a EMT or something, kind of that show and tell, that really creates that fun environment in that club. And then the other opportunity is encourage the current members to bring along some friends, or maybe some younger families that might be exploring that, give them that, dip the toe in the water experience to give them some exposure to the club.
Oh, I appreciate Pamela putting in the chat box here the whole idea of that Clover and Big Kid Project night. So it says, so you're splitting up the age groups, and that's one way to work. Now, I know that you're saying with their example here, not having that younger group, the neat opportunities, those are the mentoring opportunities that you can have. Even I know on my personal club, my son, who wasn't that old, he was probably only we were the young ones that went through, and then there was kind of a gap, so he's probably only a 7th grader or 6th grader when this was happening to him. But a new family came, and he got his the little buddy that would grab him by his leg every time we went to club meeting. But I told him, I just encouraged him to develop that friendship with that little buddy, and they're good friends now as they're older too, that they've leased animals out to each other in the last couple of years. So it's really been fun to see that happen. But without that other buddy, younger to connect to, it really helped to bridge that younger person to come into the program. And I think that works with our volunteers too, if mentoring them along and breaking up in pieces, but still someone to be the go-to that is still the coordinating, so they still need an overall leader, etc., of some sort to keep everything moving forward.
Christina, you kind of unmuted a little bit ago. I didn't know if you had something that you wanted to share. I wanted to give you a little bit of space to do that.
Well, our club is new, and we're kind of not in the showing. So I'm making it a science-based, so it's STEM, with robotics, rocketry, and then having a summer program where we just do science type things that make static projects in the end, because our static project side of the county fair has started to dwindle. And so I thought it was a good way to keep the kids, when they're not doing robotics competitions, actually together, and still, so that we don't lose the kids in between, because it is kind of taxing. And so I don't know. So ours is kind of in 4 pieces, where You have FLL, which is like that 3rd to 8th grade. And then FTC that'll be starting, which is kind of that middle school, high school. And then Rocketry has both. And then an eventual TARC team so that they have a competition side, and then your summer programs. So do you guys see at all, like when you make the committees where the youth are taking control of those pieces? Does that happen in your all's groups? Or, because that was kind of like the vision, is that the kids, once I get it established and this is what you do all the time, then the kids would kind of be taking the ownership of their own pieces that they're in charge of.
I love hearing you say vision with that, because we all know, Christina, that the more engaged and the more voice that those youth have, those are more decision-making opportunities. Oh, as long as they have those opportunities with some supportive adults to provide that guidance, we know that's a more engaged, successful, enriching program. I mean, so you're providing more higher level youth development opportunities when you can do that. So.
Yeah, and I love your STEM focus. There's just so many opportunities with that. Minnesota has an engineering design challenge, which is like the Rube Goldberg like machine that's, basically built out of a lot of junk or, surplus items. So that's a really good challenge. Rocketry, I mean, there's the ST's rockets, but there's also the water bottle or the pop bottle launchers. There's an outfit out of Idaho. I can share that with Melissa, the contact for that information. So it's super inexpensive once you buy your launchers. The only expense you have is in duct tape, basically, to make these homemade rockets. So, any of those hands-on, that experiential learning is just great to get young people involved, and giving the kids a leadership experience is super. It's just sometimes a few of them, based upon maturity, need a little bit of coaching or a little bit of encouragement sometimes to follow through if they're lagging in that area.
Right, and we were lucky that we got a large grant. So we actually have a section that we started, and we'll have full launch equipment.
Oh, good.
And so we've been working with Thor, which is the big heartland of rocketry in Omaha. So the kids will actually have the ability to go beyond 4-H and do their level 1 certification if the kids choose. So like they'll have every opportunity to do it. It's whether the parents and the kids choose to go that far with it. But so our rocketry will kind of be based on, so I left rocketry independent so that the kids would have things that they could do around sports.
Okay.
And then have launch day, and so that summer is rocketry and STEM, whatever they want to do for their projects. And then August through March or so is when both robotics teams, that's when it's really time consuming.
Okay.
So that's kind of just to kind of give an idea of, so it worked a little differently just because we got that large grant. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is trying to get it so that somebody is taking so it's not just I'm mentoring and coaching, but I can't be in all the places at all the times.
That's a really good point. And to emphasize that with parents, or as new parents are coming in, one of the things we talked about, and Carrie did that well with the paper plate activity, it's not just a drop and run, or, like you drop off your kids at practice and go pick them up. We really need to educate the parents that we need their participation to really make it work. And that interest survey or the paper plate activity is a great way to do that.
And we've been getting about 60 to 70% parent involvement. The rest are what I would consider low income, where we're covering, even giving rides and that kind of.
Okay.
So anyway, that's kind of what we're doing. So.
I hope that, you can, maybe there's some tools today that you can help utilize to share that volunteer load, because yes, you're definitely right. You can engage those youth in volunteer roles, but they still need that guidance, and so you can't do all of that guidance.
Yes. Thank you.
Anyone else, or we'll continue on? I know our time is starting to wrap up. All right. Well, then we just wanted one more last waterfall chat, of course. Let's think. Yep. Those are my favorite. What I really love about it is that we get to capture your ideas and trying to compile them and just really get a pulse of what's going on in reality out there. So this one is there any one idea or nugget that you heard today that you think you could utilize with the groups that you work with, your clubs, your volunteers? And go ahead, type it and go Clover.
I'm personally excited to see the list as a staff member and thinking different ways we can help volunteers. It's great to hear from you guys and what you're going to take and what you find the most useful. I know
out
as
there.
we're waiting for that chat to come in, it seems like a lot of the clubs in my county are single leadership. And so trying to think through with them how to start this succession planning piece and move forward from there. So that was a big nugget I felt like I took away.
One of the things to consider too, Melissa and others, is that oftentimes the person who's in that assistant leadership role that's moving into the club leadership, they'll recruit somebody that they know or are connected with, and you know, kind of more through informal discussion. It's like, hey, would you be willing to work with me to, you know, be part of the leadership team? And that seems to work pretty well, or at least one of the techniques.
Yeah, I love that. I see in here we have some paper plate and a new leadership role model, rotation model. That's a big thing they took away. The take home ideas that you provided. They did ask about the link for the resources. I don't know if that's something you could put in the chat box for them because the QR code wasn't quite working.
Yep, I could do that. And I'll ask that they keep, if you got more ideas that things are going to work for you, please put them in the chat. But I want to get us to the end here with one more just thought for you around the sense of a goose, and then I'll give you that QR code for the resources and a quick eval if you'll do that for us. So I happen to live in the migratory bird fly zone here on the western edge of Minnesota, so this really speaks to me. I see geese a lot in the spring and the fall. And so have you ever thought about the signs? You know, they certainly fly in a certain way when you watch them. So as each bird flaps its wing, it really creates an uplift for the bird immediately following. You know, by flying in V formation, the whole flock adds at least 71% greater flying range than if each bird flew on its own. So that tells us that people who maybe share a common direction and sense of community can get where they're going more quickly and easily because they're traveling on the thrust of one another. And I think that's really powerful when you think about volunteer teams versus doing it solo there. You know, when a goose falls out of formation, it suddenly feels that drag and resistance of trying to go it alone and quickly gets back into formation to take advantage of that lifting power of the bird in front. So if we have as much sense as a goose, we'll stay in formation with those of people who are heading in the same direction as us. And our direction might be 4-H, doing great things for kids and helping them do be their best and growing and those type of things. When the head goose gets tired, it rotates back in the wing and gets behind another goose and that takes on and flies point. So it really makes sense. Mother Nature knows it makes sense to take turns doing demanding jobs, whether it's with people or with the geese that are flying north or south. The goose honks from behind to encourage those up in front of it to keep up with speed. So what messages do we give when we honk from behind? Can they be encouraging positive messages more so than maybe sometimes they are? Then finally, and this is important, when a goose gets sick or is wounded and falls out of formation, 2 other geese fall out with that goose and follow it down to lend help and protection. They stay with the fallen goose until it's able to fly or until it dies. And only then do they launch out on their own or with another formation to catch up to their group. So if we have the sense of a goose and we'll stand by each other like that, if we build the culture of shared leadership, it may become possible that it'll be instinctive enough, just like the geese, that will support each other and continue that rotational shared leadership piece. All right. Thank you for entertaining me with that. That's one of my favorite little pieces there. Okay, so here's question and answers you can throw out. The bigger box, and I'm going to throw it in the, whoops, I didn't want to get you everything there. I'll throw the link in the chat, is the quick eval, just because that's something Patrick and I have to do for whenever we're out teaching, etc. And if you can do that, that would be great. Thank you. And then also the other box is the Google folder, and I will throw that in just maybe I'll give you 2 minutes, or I'll identify it as a Google folder so you don't get them mixed up. Any questions for us? Now that we've given you homework.
We want to thank you for your leadership and serving as club leaders. It makes a world of difference in the lives of kids, and just taking your time today to be on the call or on the Zoom. So we greatly appreciate that.
Yes, and thank you too for joining us and sharing all of your great tips and tricks and knowledge with us. And for those that are on, I know that it is being recorded, and we'll send out the recording, and I'm sure there'll be the slides as well, so you can also get access to those resources that way. So you can also share with other people in your community. We have a few minutes left. If anyone has some last minute questions, I'll kind of stop the recording now, and we can take time to answer any questions you may have.